This is the OFN Today, another Monday. That draws us closer to kickoff 2020. Can't wait. And especially because we haven't had any negative news regarding COVID, except for some warped out tests. But we'll talk about that a little bit later on in the show, including I'll update you on my sleepers as far as the playoffs and the Super Bowl. Of course, we talked about Ryan's sleepers last week. Ryan, good to talk to you again. And I know you were really salivating at getting you wanted to start to break down my sleepers, but what did I say? Cleveland, that was about it. I teased you with the rest.
Yeah, you teased me with Odell Beckham.
Yeah, okay. That's because you got hit hard like a lot of other media members last year on Cleveland. So
I'm not buying again.
Yeah, you're not buying. I'm going to buy, but maybe we're going to be in the same boat.
Fool me
2020. All right, so we're going to talk Baltimore Ravens football, and why not? First of all, because Earl Thomas is all over the news all weekend long, and we're starting to learn a little bit more about the whole reasoning of why Earl Thomas is no longer a Baltimore Raven. That's why I wanted to bring in our special guest, Tony Lombardi, managing partner of RussellStreetReport.com, to the show. Tony, thanks a lot for joining us again.
Hey, thanks for having me, Greg.
All right, Tony, so let's get right to it. When you heard the news that Earl Thomas was no longer going to be a member of this team, how everything kind of broke down pretty fast, how surprised were you?
I wasn't surprised at all because I was at the practice on Friday, and while at the practice, we saw, where the Ravens aligned the media to stand and watch the practices. I saw that there was a skirmish going on the sidelines, and you see these kinds of fights in camp all the time, but it's usually an offensive and a defensive guy. But this was on the Ravens defensive sideline when the first defensive team was on the sideline, and we saw there was a lot going on, and it kept going on. It spilled onto the field of practice, and it kind of ticked off John Harbaugh because now he's interrupting the reps for the other guys. So when we started looking at it closer, we saw that Earl was involved, and we were really surprised when we saw Chuck Clark was the other guy. And Chuck Clark is a mild-mannered guy, just really well liked by his teammates, works really hard in the film room, and he's really elevated his game to the point that the Ravens gave him a 3-year extension last season. So he's a guy that's really respected in that locker room, and for him to be involved in a fight is kind of shocking, particularly when it's the guy he starts next to. So that all added up to the surprise. And then, interestingly enough, John Harbaugh sent 3 guys to the locker room. One was Chuck Clark. The other 2 were Jimmy Smith and Anthony Levine. And Earl Thomas stayed on the sidelines, and he stood on the sidelines all by himself. And I thought that told a story. And we've heard some things about things that happened last season. In the offseason, we heard about the whole thing with Earl and his wife. And so this guy has never been a team player for the Ravens. He's been an aloof guy, a me guy. And in fact, I had a couple of sources tell me that after they lost the divisional game last season to the Titans, this was a devastated locker room, a locker room that just was shocked because they had Super Bowl aspirations in 2019. But now you've got Earl Thomas didn't share that degree of devastation. In fact, what he did was he celebrated the sack that he got in that game.
Nice. Sounds like something that Antonio Brown would do after a loss in the playoffs.
Very Antonio Brown-esque, really.
Yeah, and look what happened to Antonio Brown. So maybe not a surprise. Then, well, you said that. Tell me, what was that thing that you noticed on the sidelines? What was that about when the rest of the DBs were sent away and Earl Thomas is just remaining there on the sidelines? What's that about?
It was like he was ostracized. He was standing alone, and there was some talk. What John Harbaugh has done with the Ravens, they have like this council of team captains, and they might not have the title of captain, but it's a council of players that's 8 or 9 players deep, of which Earl Thomas was one. He was appointed to one of those positions because they wanted him to try to assume a role because of his pedigree, and he really never did. But he was aloof. He showed up late for team meetings at times, and after a while, the guys just were tired of him, and so this council. And I mean, when your teammates go talk about a future Hall of Famer, and they say, we don't want him on the team anymore, and the Ravens go ahead and do that despite the cap ramifications, that's a big story to tell right there.
All right, before I let Ryan chime in, what are the cap ramifications?
Well, if an outright release under normal circumstances, it would have been a wash. In other words, the Ravens, if they kept Earl Thomas or let him go, it would have been a $15 million cap hit in 2020. The fact that they're filing a grievance and they expect Earl to file a grievance in exchange, 40% of that, the guaranteed number this year, which is $10 million, goes on the Ravens' books. So they're going to realize about a $6 million cap savings by letting Earl go. Now, if the grievance goes in the way of the Ravens' favor, then that $4 million goes away. Additionally, they have some offset language in his contract for the next 3 seasons that if he's paid by other teams, the amount that he's paid by those other teams will reduce the amount of guarantee the Ravens have to pay him.
So who's on this council? Who are the leaders of the Ravens? Like in the post, like obviously Lamar Jackson's so young, and like I'm wondering who are these guys that said we don't want Ed Reed anymore? In the post, Ed Reed, Ray Lewis era, who didn't want Earl Thomas anymore?
Well, I think Calais Campbell's part of it, even though he's a new guy. I think Jimmy Smith is part of that group. I believe Mark Ingram is part of that group. Ronnie Stanley. And they don't really reveal the guys on there, but those are like the team leaders and the guys that, have pedigree. They've got good resumes and guys that are stand-up guys. And Calais Campbell has really, really stepped up as a leader. And that's unusual for a guy that's only been with the team for a couple of months.
He's one of the most respected guys in the league. I think he won the Man of the Year award last year. That kind of stuff goes a long way in an NFL locker room. Take me back a year here. If I said to you when Earl Thomas signed with the Ravens, I thought this is the perfect union. This is a guy, Hall of Fame player, defensive organization. I thought it was the perfect union. Are you surprised it didn't work out then? If I told you this is what, was only going to last a year, would you have been shocked?
Initially, I would have said the same thing you said, Ryan. That it was a really good signing, a really good fit for the Ravens, defensive-minded club, a guy that's used to have a team that's used to having that center fielder roam around and be that kind of guy. But it wasn't long into the season when he said a couple of things that were really surprising, and it made you kind of take pause, because one of the things he said was that he wasn't really embracing this playbook, that it was confusing him. And because he was used to like this cover 3 kind of alignment in Seattle, and that's not what the Ravens do much of. So there was some confusion there. And then in the breakout sessions, the guy he got in the fight with the other day, Chuck Clark, he was saying things like, this guy's a really smart player. Why did you guys even bring me here?
Sounds like he wanted out.
He's on record having said that.
Yeah.
And so when he was saying things like that, and then you start to see the freelancing. Now, Ed Reed did that kind of freelancing too, but you also had him playing with Ray Lewis. So you had 2 alpha dogs there. And so you can kind of control that a little bit when you have a Ray Lewis. But Earl Thomas just never really clicked with this team. And Wink Martindale has a group that he has players that are very multifaceted. They have different talents, and he moves them all over the field. But when you do that pre-snap, communication is so key, and that's what Chuck Clark does a great job of as the other safety. But when you have a freelance guy that's kind of running rogue on you, it makes it all fall apart. And some of the big plays that the Ravens gave up last year, particularly in that divisional playoff game, were because of Earl Thomas breaking down.
How much of this is totally unrelated, or is he just like, is this anything to do with his headspace? Have you guys been around him since the incident with his wife earlier this offseason? Like, had you guys talked to him between then and now to know, like, maybe he just isn't, fully focused on football right now?
I have not, but I know people have questioned where he is mentally, not so much the game, but as a man. And I've heard, and I haven't had this confirmed, so I'm kind of hesitant to say it, but I'll say it since we're talking, that I've heard that he's bipolar, and there's remedies for that, and because I've heard the same thing about Ed Reed, as a matter of fact. But I think with this situation that you wonder if he can't embrace the way the Ravens are doing things. He's going to do things the way he's used to, only because he can't wrap his mind around things, not only professionally but personally. And I'm sure that has to have some effect on him, what's going on at home. And add it all up, when you sucker punch a teammate, a well-respected teammate, I don't think that if this was an isolated incident, we wouldn't be having this discussion.
That's the main thing here, right? Is it's not like if this was a one-time thing, it'd be like, all right, we forgive you. This was like the cherry on the top of a very bad Sunday.
Exactly.
All right, let's stick with that secondary, Tony, because this is still, even though there are remaining pieces, proven pieces. Trade for Marcus Peters obviously was huge at corner. Marlon Humphrey. But you take a look at, let's just look at that spot, at Earl Thomas's spot first. The player that most likely will slide in to take his place. Is that Desean Elliott? Because Desean Elliott got an opportunity to play a little bit last year, had the knee injury early in the season, so didn't get a whole lot of experience. This would be his third year. He was drafted late in 2018. It was a 4th-round grade. Got drafted in the 6th round. That's how Baltimore does things. They always pick up the guys that slide down the draft boards that shouldn't. But talk a little bit about Elliott and whether or not you think he's definitely the guy to fit in.
Well, Desean Elliott's a really rangy player. He's shown some really good closing speed, when he's playing a high safety and getting to the sidelines in like a cover 2 formation. So he's shown some range with that. He's shown some really good ball skills in practice and in preseason games. And he's also shown a willingness to tackle and make some hard hits. So he's got the ability, but one thing he hasn't had is availability. And he's been injured a lot. There was a guy that the Ravens had a few years back. His name was Michael Campanero, wide receiver that a lot of guys liken to, the Wes Welker and the Julian Edelman kind of player.
From Wake Forest.
He excited a lot of fans and even the coaches as well, but he just couldn't stay on the field. And I'm afraid that Desean Elliott might be that same kind of guy because, you can only go on what he's done so far. And for them to bank on Desean Elliott, I think would be a risk. So I think that $6 million savings may be used to find some other guy or guys that can come in and be more reliable in terms of their availability. But if Desean can go and stay healthy, he's a good player. And I think he'd be a great matchup with Chuck Clark, who he's really good friends with.
And we talked about another potential sleeper in the 7th round, not week 1, but maybe this is an opportunity for Geno Stone to get more playing time.
Yeah, they like him a lot, and he's kind of like in the Chuck Clark mold. Chuck Clark was a 6th-round pick out of Virginia, and now you've got Geno Stone, and they like the way he's playing. But the thing that's working against Geno, and it's all these rookies, is that they don't have the benefit of a full camp. They don't have the benefit of preseason games, and they're going to go right into this full regular season really without having much contact. So there's a danger and a risk to that. But like you said, Greg, he might be somebody that can come along later in the season.
Yeah, it's funny. There's this perception out there around the NFL among media people, myself too, like from June, May, we kept hearing that July, that guys, late round picks or undrafted free agents, it's a tough year to be one with no preseason games and with no limited opportunity to sell yourself. But I've had a lot of people say to me recently, we might have it wrong. This might be a really good year to be one of those guys because with opt-outs and test inconsistencies and bigger practice squads, more guys than ever are going to play for a team this year. Like a team that usually uses 75 guys in a season might end up using 85 or 88 guys or something in a season. So a guy like that might not make the team originally, might end up on the practice squad and might end up playing a big role in October.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that all shakes out, Ryan, because if they get on the field prematurely, sometimes that can ruin careers because then the psyche gets shot. So we'll see. I think the Ravens have a really good history of developing those kinds of players like they have with Chuck Clark. So a Geno Stone I could see being a productive guy next year, even more productive 2 years from now. But to count on him this year, I'm not so sure about that.
I got to give it to the Ravens. We're however many minutes into this interview, and we have not mentioned Lamar Jackson. That's how the Ravens are stacked, right? That's how they're a loaded team worth talking about. He practiced today, right, Lamar?
He did practice. From what I was told from a couple of my guys that were out there, he looked really good, and they didn't see any drop-off. And in fact, they wouldn't have even known he was hurt if they weren't told that he had some soft tissue issue with his groin.
But welcome to star quarterback world, Ravens, right? Anything that happens to Lamar Jackson is like the major news of the week in the NFL.
The whole town holds their breath.
Yeah.
Speaking of the offense, Des Bryant, what was that about?
I think that the Ravens were just taking a look at him because let's face it, injuries are going to be a really big part of the 2020 season, and the Ravens have some young talent at wide receiver that they really like, and the guy that probably compares most favorably to Des Bryant is Miles Boykin, and Miles had a terrific camp in 2019, but he didn't show that on the field in the preseason and didn't really translate much in the regular season. But they say they've worked with him a lot. The transition from a receiver at the collegiate level to the professional level is oftentimes a challenging one. So I think the Ravens wanted to kind of put their toe in the water with Dez just to see what he looks like in the event that these young guys don't, pan out the way they think they might. And Ozzie Newsome has had like somewhat of I won't call it an infatuation, but an affinity for Des Bryant since they didn't get him in that draft. What was it, back in 2011, maybe somewhere around there? And so they wanted to move up and get him in that draft, but it didn't work out. They tried to get him a couple of years ago when they signed Michael Crabtree. Crabtree took the 3-year, $21 million deal and not Dez. And I'm thinking at this point, Dez probably wishes he had taken that, but he didn't. But there's always been somewhat of an affinity for Des Bryant. So who knows? He could end up on the Ravens roster, but I don't think it's a priority right now.
Sticking with the offense, offensive line, interior of the line, another thing we talked about last month. Let's talk. Is it too early? Have you heard any reports of what you've seen about the battle there at center, and also who's going to take over for Yonda?
It's tough to say because most of the time they're out there in shells, and it's hard to really gauge as to who's progressing and whatnot. I'm sure the coaches have different cues that they dial into to see if anybody's progressing more than the other guys. But it's a logjam there. You've got Skura, who's come back really quickly from an ACL and an MCL. You've got Pat McCarry, who did a really good job last year in Skura's absence. You've got Bredinson, who they just got from Michigan, Ben Powers, DJ Fluker, and Bozeman from Alabama. So there's a logjam there that they're going to have to work through. And then they just drafted Tyree Phillips. All those guys are going to be working to try to get probably 4 or 5 spots. It's great to have competition. It elevates their game, but boy, I'd hate to be a coach trying to figure out who's going to do better because they're not really practicing at full speed or in pads there all that much.
I loved what the Ravens did last year with they were playing 2 tight ends sometimes, 3 tight ends sometimes. They were really creating an offense. It wasn't just like, oh, jam your superstar into your coach's playbook. They really the coaches adapted to Lamar. And then they traded Hayden Hurst, which surprised me. I know they got a good pick back for him, a high pick back for him. I was surprised by that. Are they still – you think they'll still be a tight end heavy offense?
I think they will be, but I think that they still need that third guy.
Yeah.
They really didn't want to trade Hayden. Hayden demanded to be traded because he wanted to be the guy. He had to compete with Mark Andrews for catches, and it's hard to give Hayden Hurst Mark Andrews catches because Mark Andrews is just one of the top tight ends in the league now. So I think that Hayden just really wanted more playing time, wanted an opportunity where he'd see the ball a little bit more. The pick that they got for Hayden Hurst from Atlanta was the pick that they used on J.K. Dobbins, and he's looking really good at camp.
He was the next guy I was going to ask you about. Perfect segue. Go ahead there.
He is a perfect fit for the Ravens offense. Mark Ingram looks really good, and he'll be the starter. But talk about a 1A and a 1 and 1A. That's a good 1-2 punch there. And it probably will spell the end of Gus Edwards, I think, in Baltimore. Not because Gus has done anything wrong, but because I think that probably up his sleeve is a trade that Eric DeCosta may be waiting for that right team at the right time if there's an injury. Because Gus is a productive player, but you can't have too many of the same kinds of players. And when you look at Ingram and Dobbins and Gus, they're all similar players. Justice Hill is probably a little bit of a change-up from all 3 of those guys, so I think he sticks around. And plus, he has some special teams capabilities that I don't think Gus Edwards has. So I think Gus might be the odd man out. But yeah, to answer the question about Hayden Hurst, I think tight end, they're going to be looking for a third tight end. I don't think he's on the roster right now.
What about Breeland? I know we talked about him when we were going over the rookie free agents. I guess he's, of course, the injury. I don't even know if he's had an opportunity to play yet, but he had a 4th-round grade coming into the draft. He tore his ACL in October, but he was on his way to having a huge season last season before the injury. is it possible that at some point during the season, it may be 2021, that he could be that third guy?
I do believe that that's the case, and they liked him a lot. They have him on IR right now because I don't know how serious the injury is, but it's probably serious enough that with a limited training camp and no preseason games, they're not going to get much productivity out of him. So they did put him on IR. So they hope to get something out of him in 2021.
All right, and then I just also wanted to go back to the secondary. What about Tavon Young? Because here's another guy that just can't stay healthy. But
Yep.
how does the secondary look with he's on the field with Humphrey? Who plays the slot? Who goes outside?
Humphrey was more natural outside,
Right.
although he did a nice job in the slot last year. He's more natural outside. Tavon is one of the better slot corners in the league. And he's just very mobile, lateral, shifty, has that great change of direction skills, and can stay with those smaller, faster, speedier, slot guys. If there's a guy on the Ravens that you might want to see cover Tyreek Hill, it would be Tavon Young. So that's the kind of guy and kind of player he is. He's really tackles well for somebody as slight as he is. But like you said, Greg, he's a guy that's had a hard time staying on the field. So they'll probably try to keep him in situations where he's not asked to do a lot of tackling, except for the guy he's covering.
And what about another rookie free agent, Khalil Dorsey? Here's a kid that had a huge career, Northern Arizona, so it's not a big-time school, but as decorated as you can get for that type of a program. Does he have a chance to make the team?
I think it's going to be tough for him to make the team. I think he's more of a practice squad guy, and with the practice squad being expanded and rosters being expanded, I think he's got a pretty good chance of sticking around and being part of Wink Martindale's defense. Because one thing that he'll see being part of this defense is that those players love Wink, and when you have a team that really works together, the camaraderie and the swagger on that defense, it kind of reminds me of the old swagger the Ravens used to have when Ray and Ed were around. So when you kind of have that kind of, you're bringing that to the field, and you've got a coach that they love him almost like the old Ravens used to love Rex Ryan. That's a good thing, and I think Tavon will be part of that mix, and all these younger guys will want to stick around because they'll want to be part of that defense. And you can't keep all these guys anyway, so the young guys can come along, and stashing them on the practice squad, it helps them in years to come.
It's funny. I just mentioned how Earl Thomas struck me as like the perfect Ravens player when he signed. Speaking of the perfect Ravens player, I mean, is Patrick Queen the perfect Ravens player or what?
He's fast, he's smart, he's young.
It just seems like they just, who they're going to draft or sign before, because it's like that guy is the perfect Ravens player. Like, I couldn't believe when he was sitting there at 28 or whatever it was. I knew that's who they were going to pick.
And he's got this desire to be great, and he's a sponge when it comes to studying, because you see him and Chuck Clark out on the field talking to each other all the time. Chuck Clark is the green dot guy for the Ravens defense, but yeah. Patrick Queen's always talking to him. What do you do here? What do you do there? So he's being a sponge. He's just turning 21 years old, so and he's got a lot of speed. He's good. He's going to probably build up in the next off season, but right now, him and Malik Harrison, that's a great 1-2 tandem in the inside for the Ravens interior linebackers for years to come.
You think Martindale was disappointed? Obviously he's disappointed. That's a silly way to phrase it, I guess. But you think he's you think he's desperate to be a head coach, or you think he's okay with where he's at? I know the Giants interviewed him. I think maybe another team or two interviewed him. Is he running out of time, desperate to take an opportunity, or he's content with where he's at?
I think that a lot of times what happens when you're part of the Ravens organization, and this happened with Eric DeCosta as well, is you embrace the organization, you see how well run it is, and you don't want to go and take a job. Like Eric could have had GM positions with other teams.
You don't take one just to take one.
He could have probably had a head coaching position last year, but he's really, he's looked around and he says, if I can't replicate this situation, I don't know if I want to take that chance and be a one and done kind of coach. So, I think they've taken care of him financially. They love having him here. He loves being here. I think if the right situation comes along, Wink would take it. And I think he'd be a good head coach because players love him. And John would endorse him up and down because he loves him as well. But he certainly doesn't want to lose him. And it's really interesting that a 14-2 team hasn't lost much in terms of personnel nor its coaching staff. And that's why I think the Ravens are in good position in this kind of strange season, to go back and try to be a postseason representative again this year.
All right. Before we let you go, Tony, apparently no fans for a while.
Yeah, they started out talking like there would be 20,000 fans at the stadium. And then they said, okay, we're going to go down to 7,000 fans at the stadium. And now they've been working with, local health officials and Governor Hogan and Mary Young, and they've concluded for the initial part of the season, how you define initial, I don't know, but the initial part of the season, there will be no fans at the Ravens games.
Most teams are saying the first month. Most teams are ruling out September, and then we'll revisit in October. And then like September 15th, we'll find out there's no fans in October. And October 15th, we'll find out there's no fans in November. And it's just...
Don't you think there should be some consistency across the league with this?
I absolutely do. I was just on a conference call with the NFL vice president and CMO, and that question was asked by one of the other writers, and they basically deflected it to the state and local governments and said, we're hands off. Whatever each community feels safe with, we interact with them, but kind of defer to them. We are involved, but they have the final say. I totally agree with McDermott and McVay, who both said there should be some consistency. It doesn't make any sense, especially if you're going to be piping in crowd noise. Now you're affecting the games. It should be all or nothing, and the crowd noise should be television only.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I agree.
Yeah. I mean, that doesn't sound fair at all to have crowd noise unless it's just for the fans. But you're going to, I think, and your answer makes sense, because that's what I heard about 2 months ago, that the NFL basically said, we're going to allow, as long as the local governments we will allow up to half occupancy. And it's up to every state governor, whoever's making these decisions, to decide whether or not they want to do that or go their own way. So it's not a surprise that everybody's making their own decision.
That's exactly what they said, is it shouldn't be a surprise that it's not one size fits all. But just because it's not a surprise doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. You're sending these guys who live in the fall in Buffalo, New York, out to Miami, Florida, which is a hot spot. Yes, they're not necessarily going to be around the fans, but it just takes one incident. It takes a fan climbing onto the field, or whatever it takes. A guy who sees somebody he wants to talk to in the stands. I don't like it at all.
No, and then the pumped-in noise. I don't. What are they going to do? Have a certain cap on decibel levels that they probably consult with the Falcons and the Saints about how you do that well, because they've been pumping in crowd noise for a long time.
I think Penn State gets accused of that too.
All right, Tony, RussellStreetReport.com. I'm assuming you got a lot talking about Earl Thomas, and what else you got working on the website?
We've got the camp reports that we come up with every day, and we also have the cap situation and the impact of Earl Thomas. So if any of your listeners and viewers want to check that out, it's under salary cap on Ravens or Russell Street Report.
Excellent. Great job as always, Tony. Looking forward to talking to you again when the season is underway and we can actually start talking about some games.
Right. Can't wait, guys.
Thanks,
Tony.
For the time. All right. Tony Lombardi, RussellStreetReport.com. And that, I think, if we're, let's see, AFC, I know that, I think we've had a couple of interviews, Cleveland, Cincinnati, and Baltimore. Pittsburgh, we're still trying to find a Pittsburgh guest. We'll definitely work on that real soon, though. All right, let's talk about sleepers, because and by the way, the season is going to be here in just a few weeks, so we're going to have our previews for the season. So these are just our initial sleepers. We'll have our official sleepers, our Super Bowl picks, and so forth. We'll talk about the odds, obviously, and the reason why we're going with some of these teams, not just the picks themselves. So go ahead and give us the teams that you said that were your sleepers again. You had Atlanta,
Minnesota, Arizona, Minnesota,
Denver,
and Denver. Yep.
Didn't you have one more? 5 teams.
Houston? Did I have a fifth one? No. No, I don't think it was. No, I think I did 4. I think I did those 4.
Okay. And then
Oh no. Denver, Minnesota, Atlanta, Tennessee, Arizona, and
that
Denver.
was it. Tennessee, yes.
Okay. They shouldn't care. That's why you and I couldn't think of it, because they were in the AFC Championship game last night. bogus sleeper. It's a bogus sleeper.
Yeah, we and look, that's why you want to take advantage of it, no question.
Yeah.
They were 40 to
That's what you
1.
look-
I haven't even checked the odds
Yep.
this week, but they were 41 at the time. Now I mentioned Cleveland was one of my 5, so and they're 30 to 1, so they're right there on the edge. But let's go with some that are a lot further down. Let's go with one that I think is definitely a surprise. 60 to 1.
Okay.
The LA Rams.
Whoa.
Now, I know the
Okay.
Rams are not the team. Look, based on what we saw last year,
Their window closed fast, Greg. Their window closed so
that's
fast.
the thing, is that I don't know on paper still, when I take a look at what's there, I still think that there's enough that at 60 to 1, it's worth a shot. Do I think at 20 to 1, or without even talking about odds, that I'm taking the Rams? No, of course not. In that division, you got Seattle and San Francisco at the top. No way. But when I'm talking, I'm trying to roll the dice and see if everything works out, and especially the defensive coordinator. Wade Phillips is gone. He was there originally as an older guy with head coaching experience. That's what McVay needed. But now he's gone, and he brings in a Vic Fangio protege, a younger guy. Now, this might be a disaster, but you know what? It might be a stroke of genius. We have no idea. So I just think there's too much talent and coaching ability for this team to be a 60 to 1 shot.
Yeah, look, I mean, it was only a couple years ago that they had the most talented nucleus in the NFL, and the coach everybody wanted to find the next Sean McVay. It's crazy how if you think the Falcons window closed fast, the Rams window slam shut. I think the NFC, I like the pick. I just think the NFC East has the NFC West might be the deepest of all 8 divisions this year. The Rams could come in last place.
You know, what's going to be interesting is going to be San Francisco, because all you have to do is take a look at history. And history tells you that when you lose the Super Bowl, unless you're the New England Patriots, you lose the Super Bowl, you may not even make it back to the postseason the next year. And people go, oh, yeah, but not this team. But they say that every year. No, not this team. And look what happened to the Rams last year.
No,
yeah, so if that happens to San Francisco, that will open things up for the Rams, or like your pick, Arizona, to make a move.
But you're talking about a team with no Todd Gurley, no Brandon Cooks, no Ndamukong Suh, right? No
Dante Fowler,
Corey Littleton, Dante Fowler. They lost
Peters,
a lot from that team.
Jalen Ramsey must become a stud again for them to have a chance.
Yep.
I don't know. I don't know what the situation is with Ramsey. What's your guess?
Did he get paid yet? He did. Did he get his big contract?
Well, with the Rams? Yeah, but I mean, he's well. How much of? I have to take a look and see how much of it is the big contract we're talking about. But I'm trying to remember whether or not he got the.
He got traded, but I don't know. I don't think he got his big contract.
Well, check that. I want to. Yeah, because I don't know because you would think that if he didn't get paid.
Nope, he didn't. He has not gotten paid. Nope. He is making $10 million, which is not what he was looking to make. So,
when's the contract up?
This year.
Okay. And is that still the Jags contract, or was that a Ram contract?
Nope, that's still the Jaguars contract.
Okay.
So you're asking me what I think of Ramsey? I think Ramsey's gonna throw a fit until he gets his contract. That's what I think.
But this is his opportunity to prove whether or not he should be that guy, because he definitely didn't play like that guy last year.
He's already proven he's good enough to get a good contract. His mind, he don't have anything.
On his mind. But if Jalen Ramsey plays this year the way he played last year, he's never seeing anything like the money that he thinks he's going to get. It's just not.
Yeah, Jamal Adams didn't have to prove. Didn't feel like he had to prove it after 3 years, and Ramsey's better than Jamal Adams.
Well, though, last year Ramsey just didn't play up to Ramsey's standard.
Yeah,
that's the thing.
Well,
and that's why I think that if he can be that guy this year, and maybe this has got to be motivation for him to be that guy, then that's a big plus for the Rams. So, and look, they got rid of Peters, they got rid of Talib, they got rid of what's his name? Weddle retired. Oh,
I think it goes the other direction, and it's a very sticky situation.
All right, I am also going to take Detroit. Detroit is going to be a big sleeper for me. I think they could actually, I think they had a shot to win the division if all goes well out of most of these teams I have here, because a lot of these teams are playing the Seattles and the Baltimores and so forth in their divisions. But Detroit, even though Green Bay had a huge year last year, I think they're susceptible. Detroit looked really good when the season began last year. Stafford looked excellent. He got the injury. It was a disaster. They still competed every week. They were in almost every game with the worst quarterback play in the NFL, basically, and they had tons of other injuries. So if they can stay healthy, it's another year in the system. The GM, the head coach, they're on thin ice. They can't have a non-playoff year, or it's a new regime. I think Detroit's going to have a bounce-back year big time.
I agree. I like them a lot. For a playoff team, as I said last week, I think the NFC is wide open. So I think any of the 7 teams that make it in the NFC could go to the Super Bowl. Definitely like the Lions as a possible, no worse than second in the NFC North.
All right, now I'm going to give you one you'll probably be surprised about. This is more of a playoff sleeper, but I think that we're going to get an even better year after an improvement last year from Las Vegas. I think the Raiders are going to be battling for a playoff spot late in the season. Obviously, Carr has got to prove whether or not he's the man. I don't know. That's the one thing. He's such a dink and dunk guy. It's just so frustrating.
I'm surprised at all if Mariota's starting there by week 5. Won't be surprised.
That would be interesting if Mariota, new system, John Gruden, weather, change of scenery, if he stays healthy, if all of a sudden, boom, the light turns on.
Won't be surprised at all. Gruden loved him coming out in the draft. You hear him talk about him now. He still talks about him like a man crush. I won't be surprised at all if Mariota's starting there. And to me, I see what you're saying about the Raiders, but to me, I hesitate. To me, that's like picking the Bears. Like you have 2 quarterbacks, you have no quarterback until I see that you have 1 quarterback.
Well, Carr is definitely the starter. You have any reason to believe that he's not going to start week 1?
Week 1, no, but I think he's on one of the shortest leash spells.
Okay. Yeah, one of the other teams that actually I was thinking about, but there were a few teams that we agreed on that I was also there with you. Obviously, Tennessee, I was definitely there. Minnesota, and I'm gonna have an interview coming up this weekend with a beat writer for the Vikings, so I'll be interested to see exactly what goes on there and talk about the Vikings and so forth, because they have a lot of new young players. Like over 20 new young. How many picks did they have? Like 14 draft picks?
15 draft
Crazy.
picks.
So we'll find out whether or not that will come into play. Chargers, I'm going to have that interview on Wednesday. That's a mystery team. The Chargers with a new location. No Phillip Rivers. What do you think about Anthony Lynn?
I think Anthony Lynn does a solid job. I think he's a mediocre 16 out of 32 kind of head coach, nondescript kind of head coach. I don't think he's hurting the team. Look, here's what I think about the Chargers. I think they have one of the most talented rosters in the NFL, and yet they somehow always perennially, going back to Marty Schottenheimer era, underachieve. I would have liked to see Tom Brady sign there, because I think the rest of the roster is so good that the Chargers would have been better than maybe the Bucs will be, if that makes sense. The Chargers with Brady would have been better than the Bucs with Brady. I just think that team was a quarterback away. Rivers, kind of got stale there and wasn't performing at the high level that he had been accustomed to. I was very surprised that they didn't make a move for after they didn't get Brady, they didn't try to get, Bridgewater, or who are some of the other quarterbacks here that moved this year? Cam Newton. I was very surprised that they went the rookie route, because I don't think it's a rebuilding team, and yet you drafted Justin Herbert, which says it's a rebuilding team.
Yeah, I don't want to hear anybody talking about Tyrod Taylor. I'm so sick of hearing about stuff like that. We know what Tyrod Taylor is.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why I thought Cam Newton would have been good there. Brady would have been good there. Bridgewater. Help me out, Greg. Who else changed teams this year? Rivers.
There weren't a lot of them. That was the problem. Yeah, there were not a lot of high quality or even medium quality. I mean, you mentioned them. I can't remember
I feel like there's one other guy I'm missing that changed teams. But anyway, point being, like I don't look at them as like a starting from scratch team the way I look at the Bengals.
You mentioned
with Joe Burrow.
Rivers.
Yeah, the Bengals with Joe Burrow are starting over. The Dolphins with Tua are basically starting over. I don't think the Chargers have to start over, so I'm surprised that they didn't add somebody better than Tyrod Taylor to start right now.
Who do you think starts week 1 for the Dolphins?
Fitzpatrick.
Yeah. Tua's going to get in there early, though.
Yeah, as long as he's healthy. But,
Fitzpatrick had his typical 1 year with the team. And, he's just, I'm just so over Fitzpatrick. I've been over for him for years. It's so fun.
I don't think Tyrod Taylor can play. I think Fitzpatrick can play.
I agree with that. Fitzpatrick's better than Taylor. I just think, Fitzpatrick coming out last year talking about, oh, this is the most fun I've ever had. I'm like, whoa. I remember you playing for the Jets a few years ago, and you looked like you were having a pretty good time. And that was a winning team that if you actually played well enough late in the season, they would have made the postseason. Don't go telling me you had the most fun ever last year with the Dolphins.
Yeah, I say that every year. It's like it's training camp playbook, Greg. I'm in the best shape of my life. I'm having the most fun I've ever had. I've never felt bigger, faster, stronger. Yeah. This new coaching staff has figured things out. Training camp playbook.
Was Foles the guy?
Yeah,
that would probably be one of the other guys we were thinking about. Yeah, because
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I you know what? And again, I just think the Fangio loss is so huge for them. But if their defense comes back to playing better and Foles starts week 1 and it looks like there's a drastic difference, I could see the Bears being a lot better than people think. But, Foles would have to stay healthy over 16 games, and I'm not sure that would happen. All right, so you have anything you're working on, Ryan?
Big Jason Garrett story in the Post tomorrow. Big J got dug into the entire Garrett family. Jason Garrett was his dad was actually hired as a Giants assistant coach in 1970, exactly 50 years before Jason was. So he's got a lot of dug into his Giants ties. Everybody kind of thinks of him as a Cowboys guy. Played there, obviously coached there forever. Everybody thinks of him as a Cowboy guy, but Jason Garrett says he's a Jersey guy. So here he is.
So we'll look out for that. New York Post at NewYorkPost.com. And also we want to, at some point in the next couple of weeks, have you on to talk about the Giants and maybe have you on as a guest on our Jet show too. But we have a few weeks to go before the season begins. Ryan, appreciate it. I know you're busy. We'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good. I'll be at Jets practice tomorrow. We'll check in.
Excellent. Thank you.